we will move to the keynote speech entitled What We Should Aim For in 2012. We have Mr. Takejiro Sueyoshi, who will be delivering the speech. Thank you.
Once again, good afternoon to you all. On behalf of one of the sponsoring organizations, Japan New Energy Foundation, I'd like to thank you for coming to this event. I also would like to thank the speaker who has traveled from London and was traveling over a long distance, and yet he showed no fatigue and he was so powerful and with the British humor included. Thank you very much. Professor Ryuji Yamamoto, thank you very much for your appearance. Also the panelists, I will once again thank all of them for their attendance. WWF Japan, I also would like to thank them for together hosting this conference. And I'd like to thank TMG and Environment Ministry for co-sponsoring this event. I'd like to have a little time with you and share some of my thoughts. First of all, the relationship between environment and Olympic Games. I'd like to look back at the history of modern Olympic Games. As you know, in 1894, I hear it was in 1894, famous Baron Coubertin proposed the birth of modern Olympic Games. And in the same year, IOC was created. 2 years afterwards, in 1896, the first modern Olympic Games was held in Athens. What he proposed, which turned out to be the Olympism, or the Olympic movement, if you will, would be this. Through the act of sports, you will improve the body and mind, overcoming the differences of culture and nationalities. We will contribute to the realization of peace and better world. This is the kernel of Olympism. Under this Olympism, Olympic Games for a long time had the two major themes. The two major themes are sports and culture. However, in 1994, for the first time, the environmental consideration was included into Olympic Charter. Olympic Charter was revised to have the inclusion of environmental consideration. In the past, sports, society, cities, and economy. In these four areas, legacies should be created. And then in addition to that, environment was added onto it. And it happened in 1994. Why in this year environment was introduced? In my limited knowledge, I could imagine that 2 years prior to that, in 1992, the first Earth Summit, so-called Rio Summit, was held. And that this triggered the worldwide interest on the global warming issue. So that was the background of the time. Talking about the Olympic Charter, in 2011 it was revised. In the first chapter, Olympic movement and its activities, and then item 2 under that says the mission and role of IOC. There is one section. And item 13 says as follows. Being interested in environmental problems through enlightenment and implementation, the responsibility would be discharged at the same time in the world of sports, especially in hosting the Olympic Games. Sustainable development must be promoted. So these are the words included into the Olympic Charter. What does it mean? Naturally, it means that in 1994, 2011, through these accentuating moments, Olympic Games cannot be held without the consideration to environment. So environment becomes an indispensable element in running and hosting the Olympic Games. And then after 2011, reusable energy had to be introduced. That's the global warming countermeasures would have to be introduced. In a different phrase, Olympic Games is an opportunity where the people across the world will consider about the global environment. It's a changed recognition triggered by the change in the Olympic Charter. So the Olympic Games, which incorporated in the most biggest way that environment and be successful, was the 2012 London Olympic Games. I think that is the commendation given to London Olympic Games. Bearing those in mind, I would like to consider what would be the roles and responsibilities of Tokyo 2020. We need to consider that. In different wording, Olympic Charter attaches great importance to Olympic legacy. So from Tokyo Games, what can we leave to generations? What kind of legacies can we leave to the posterities? Naturally, the answers would be the environmentally eco-friendly city Tokyo, or environmental-based country Japan that must be promoted. Or as environmental ministry reports, we will be preempting the realization of the society symbiotic with the environment on a recycled base. In other words, we will aim at the creation of the low-carbon society. I don't have to tell you, they would follow naturally. So on these points, Professor Yamamoto and the panelists, the experts, will discuss during the panel discussion. So here, I would like to focus on 2 points which I think important. The first point is the CO2 emission reduction. That is something that we have to be very serious about. As you know, from 2 years ago until last year, IPCC came up with the 5th evaluation report. The contents are known to you through the media reports. To me, most shocking thing is the next request, the following demand. In order to protect the rise of the global temperature within 2 degrees Celsius, by the year 2050, the CO2 emission will have to be reduced by 40 to 70%. It's enormous, 40 to 70% reduction. Furthermore, further shocking thing is that by the year 2100, 0 would have to be the case, or we have to have the minus emission. It's not don't emit CO2. It says that it should go to the negative domain. It's a very tough order. Naturally, at the upcoming COP21, which will be held from the end of November to the 12th of December, COP20 in Paris, there will naturally be a very stringent demand put upon the CO2 emission reduction. Again, you know that through the media report, already the country-specific reduction targets were presented, and largely they are saying that 40 to 50% reduction. Those countries coming up with the plan. However, in the case of Japan, that discussion is not making almost any progress. Well, related articles are appearing in the media, but we are right in the middle of discussion here in Japan. So considering that, by the time of Tokyo 2020, through thinking about the environment, we will have to be more serious about coming up with the countermeasures against global warming and reduction of CO2. We have to appeal that Japan is a country which is serious about reduction of CO2 emission and combating global warming. Another point is the worry that I have on behalf of the foundation that I belong to. It seems that Japan may be running behind the big wave of energy reform happening in the world. For example, last year, calendar year 2014, the global number of the introduction of renewable energy, in the case of photovoltaics, per year, in 1 year, 45 gigawatt was introduced. In other words, 45 million 45 million watts were introduced. In 2010, it was only 100 million kilowatts, but now it's nearly 200 million kilowatts. And during this year, it will go beyond that. 200 million means that Japanese all power plants put together, that's 220 million kilowatts about. So with the photovoltaic energy, of course, it talks about only the capacity. But in addition to that, wind energy. Last year alone, 50 gigawatt increase happened. 370 gigawatt is the installed capacity. So putting them it is in the order of 500 or 600 gigawatts. So 5-10 years ago, who imagined this magnitude? Furthermore, in the Western countries taking the lead, the volume of power generation, 40% of the consumed electricity would be within the target, and it will be almost achievable. That's what's happening in the Western world. And in this context, the Japanese approach to renewable energy may be lagging behind. Are we really serious about promoting the introduction of the renewable energy? The second viewpoint, this may be a little digressing from the theme of Olympic Games, including myself. I may be impolite to you, but most of the people in the audience included, Japan and Japanese people have a weakness. We have a weak spot. What is the weak spot that Japan and Japanese people have? We tend to feel that a world's happening is not incorporated in our own mind. The flip side of the coin is that the global topics are discussed, but we say that Japan is in a special situation. We can't do that. Japan is a uniquely positioned country. Everything is led into the uniqueness about Japan. I think that's the weakness of Japanese people and the country of Japan. The world's resolution, the solution in the world, we have a pretext, we have an excuse to move our eyes away from the solution in the world. Flip side of the coin is that we will be left alone, lagging behind. We will be left alone, backward. We are the country in the Far East, and viewed from the Great Britain, we are in the Far East, at the other side of the globe. But it's not only Far East. We are putting ourselves into an island in the wide and big ocean. Maybe absolutely what we say is that the world exists. That's why Japan can exist. The other way around is not possible. So we have to consider what we can do for the cause of the world. CO2 issue is not something that Japan is excused from doing so because it's so difficult. So CO2 issue is a country-specific problem, and yet it's a global problem. So we have to take initiative and we have to take the lead in taking up this problem. So considering the Olympic Games from the 5 continents, more than 200 economies will participate into this game. This is a global event. It is a world's event. If so, we Japanese and the country of Japan will have to think, triggered by the Olympic Games, we will have to have a sort of a sympathy and empathy with the world. For the solution of the world, what can we do? We must single-mindedly consider what we can do, what we can contribute for the cause of the world. If you follow that, 2020 Olympic Games, preparation therefore, hosting the game and preserving the legacy in the entire process, we will have the empathy with the rest of the world. It's going to be a very important theme for us. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is a fundamental principle of Olympism. There are many interesting things mentioned. For example, Olympism is the philosophy of life. Well, philosophy of life. I never thought that Olympic Games would be held based upon the philosophy on life. But I think it's wonderful. The objective of Olympism is to promote peaceful society, it says. The purpose of Olympic movement is through the implementation of sports, young people will be educated so that they can contribute to the construction of a peaceful and better world. It says so. It's a fantastic, wonderful philosophy. Now then, peaceful and better world. In order to create such world, what are necessary? What things are necessary? The first basic tenet would be that we have to have a healthy earth. Only then we will be able to create a peaceful and better society. If earth is sick, we can't afford to have sports and Olympic Games. Nation states and a global society must be peaceful. Only then we can enjoy sports and Olympic Games. Just to be reminded of the 1940 Tokyo Games, which never came. 1940. The famous Jigoro Kano made an enormous effort, and then he brought the successful bid for the Tokyo Games in 1940. I recently visited Mr. Mizuno's office. There was a poster showing that. In 1940, actually, Japan was supposed to be hosting the Tokyo Olympic Games in 1940. But unfortunately, because of the Second World War, we just returned the right to host the Olympic Games. So if war is there, we can't afford to host Olympic Games. Naturally, for Japan, there is another thing which shouldn't be put to oblivion, and that is the disaster as a result of 2011, March 11. So without the reconstruction of the disaster area, if we are just euphoric about the Tokyo Olympic Games, it's not the right way. We should never forget the disaster of March 11. So considering these factors, Tokyo 2020, I don't have to tell you, I know, should not be a place where we just covet gold medals. How many events can be held in Tokyo Olympic Games? Or Japan is a country known for hospitality. Japan is a good country. Just come along and enjoy. This is not good enough to consider about Tokyo 2020. What I feel strongly is that the Tokyo 2020 consider this game is to consider how the earth should be, how the global society should be in the 21st century. In that context, how Japan should go and how Japanese people should live. Olympic Games would give us a golden opportunity to consider seriously about those things. Of course, we shouldn't expect too much from the Olympic Games. But triggered by the Olympic Games, triggered by Tokyo 2020, befitting 21st century, new value orientations could be introduced, and we can have a first step forward for the implementation of the new value orientation. Life philosophy proposed by Olympism. The befitting 21st century, a good 21st century-like life philosophy would be created, triggered by Tokyo 2020. That is my sincere hope. So this brings us to the end of my presentation. Once again, I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation given to my foundation, Japan Renewable Energy Foundation. So with that gratitude, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. That was Dr. Takejiro Sueyoshi.